Well, good morning, Valley. Good to see you this morning, our friends and family, and welcome. Got to meet a few newcomers today as well. And hello to those in the fellowship hall down the hallway. It's pretty full over there too. We're glad you're here. Before we open up the scriptures in Daniel 11, we'll get there in a moment, a little family update. We had you help us about 4 weeks ago or more with a survey, and I wanted to give you an update on that. And before we get to those and how those responses came in, so about 2 years ago, we were hosting two services on a Sunday. Two services, and we are welcoming about 700 souls on average each Sunday. That's kids, teens, adults. So we prayerfully decided to add a third service on Sunday mornings. That's been a little over 2 years, and it's served us well. And now currently with our three services, we've been welcoming over 1,100 souls on a Sunday. And so we're excited for that. We always think it's good news when someone finds a home at a local church to grow, to come to know Christ, to follow him in baptism, to grow in his word. And so we've been prayerfully considering that it's time, as you guys feel it in here, to add a fourth service. So we asked you some questions about a fourth service. Here's the responses. Thank you. You responded in numbers. It was great. We had 419 total surveys get back to us. And it's very helpful for us. And the main question we asked is, would you consistently attend a Sunday afternoon or early evening service? Knowing that is not the prime optimal inviting hour, but could we make a late afternoon or early evening service work? 151 surveys responded yes. We could consistently attend an evening service. You can see the breakdown, 69 of you from this service, that's helpful. And because we do need to rehome some of us. You like that word? It's a little nicer. We're not kicking you out, but we need to rehome you. And we'd like it if you made that choice yourself. So, those surveys represent like over 100 kids and like over 40 youth, which is helpful as well because it's not just sanctuary space we need, it's kids space and youth space as well. We gave you four times to choose from: 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. You can see that 4 p.m. was almost half. We do need something that would work for families that could still maybe go out to dinner, have dinner around their table, and get the bedtime routine. So that's probably why the earlier service is working. So a few of the responses you gave too, you had some write-in responses. And what we gathered over that, there was a lot of concern for our well-being. Thank you for the pastors, directors, and staff and volunteers. Thank you for that concern as well. That's something we're keeping an eye on as we look to add a fourth service. There seemed to be overwhelming support that, this is what we need to do. We need to turn the lights on one more time, set the table one more time, because I think you're feeling the blessed squeeze. Is that what we can call it, the blessed squeeze? So that was good. And then a lot of suggestion about, what about a Saturday night service? And we've known that probably Saturday night would be the popular vote more than a late afternoon Sunday. But because we are trying to keep a good work, rest, Sabbath kind of balance, we're doing the best we can to see if we can make it work on a Sunday. Sunday already for our staff and volunteers, that's a day of ministry. Saturday, so far, we've been able to protect. That's when our kids are out of school. That's when we get to have that day, full day. And so I'm doing my best to keep that. I don't know what the future will have, but we're gonna do our best to see if we can make it work on a Sunday. That's our aim. But we're keeping in mind, and we don't know what the future will have, whether we would offer something on Saturday. So here's what we've prayerfully decided as a staff. We're gonna launch a 4:15 p.m. service beginning in October. So a couple months away, October 5th. We chose 4:15. We felt like the earlier one would serve families, make it more conducive for them. But there's something about if it's 4 o'clock, that means you're getting ready at like 3 something and leaving your house at 3 something. We thought this way, maybe 4 o'clock is when you need to leave. There's something about I get the day. I don't know if it's psychological. We may bump that around, but 4:15 would also allow you back, around your dinner table if you do a little bit later on a Sunday, or to gather with friends after service for dinner. So we're aiming at that right there. Here's where we would like, when you gave us those surveys, that was just giving us a little pulse check. Now we're actually asking you, a number of you to make a commitment if you would. So think through whether you would help us launch, be on our launch team to help us launch this service, this 415 in a healthy way. And what we're looking for is some people that would be willing to say, we will make the 415 our consistently attended service for at least 3 months. If you'd see us through October, November, and December to get off to a start, we did that when we launched 3 services, and we had about 100 people just kind of verbally say, we'll come to the 8 o'clock for 3 months. And that's the last we said, because that got us off to a good start. And then after that, if they loved that service, they kept going. But if not, they could drop off. If you were to make and join our launch team and say, we'll be there those 3 months, it is okay on a Sunday if you need to attend the morning service. We're not gonna kick you out. You told us you'd come Sunday. We're just kidding. We know it may work out for your schedule, of course. But we're hoping and praying that for some, they'll find a home at that 415 and it'll really work. So I want you to talk with your friends, talk with your family, talk with your life group, talk with your ministry team that maybe even together say, hey, let's make that 415 our home. If it doesn't work for you, that's all right. We need people at the 9:30 as well. We need you here, but we're praying that this would help us with the blessed squeeze. And we just rejoice anytime a family can find a home. Someone can come and learn and grow in Christ. There's many, many strong churches in Redding. We rejoice whenever someone finds a home at any of them. And we also rejoice if they find a home with us. So here's what we need. I gave you a paper form in your bulletin if you want to use that as a reminder. If you're willing to join that launch team to say, yeah, we'll be there those 3 months to get off to a healthy start. You can fill this out, or there's a QR code that if you want to do it digitally, that'll get us right there. The same questions are there. I'll probably send an email out this week that has the link as well. But we want you to prayerfully consider that. Here's the thing about the service. The Sunday 4:15, it'll be the same teaching, probably the same teacher. We're aiming it's the same teacher as the morning will teach at the 4:15. It'll be the same worship set as well, probably a different worship team, but the same songs that we sung in the morning. We're able to offer kids ministry all the way up through youth as well at the 4:15. But there'll be a little bit different. If you have kids 5 years and older, you'll come and check them in at the 4:15 service, but then bring them into the sanctuary. We're gonna worship together as a family with our 5 years and up to the teens. We'll worship together. Then after that worship set, we will bless and dismiss the kids and the teenagers to their rooms. If you have a kid 0 to 4, you'll check them in and you're welcome to leave them. We'll be ready to have them the whole service. Again, we may tweak things as we find what's needed. We may bump things back and forth around, but that's what's happening. So if you're willing to join that and say, we would love to know that we've got people willing to say, and that's probably the last you'll hear from us, because if it works and fits, then you'll continue beyond. If not, you can choose the service that works best for you. We also, of course, we're gonna need to increase our ministry teams. And this is something that we get to do as a church. And so we're gonna need help for kids ministry at that 4:15. Ushers, we're looking to raise up specific ushers just for the 4:15. Welcome team, tech team, all the different areas, welcome and greeters and setup and tear down. Many of you are already enlisted in like 3 or 4 ministries. And you're gonna hear me, your pastor, say this, and you're gonna go, okay, I can add a 5th. I am not speaking to you. I don't mean that about it. This is not directed to you. I am not asking you to burn yourself out for the rest of the church. I believe this is a wonderful time for those of you that call Valley your home, yet you have yet to find that ministry team to come alongside us as we reach and teach and equip others in the context of family. And so this is a wonderful time to jump in. And maybe you can jump in at the 4:15, or maybe you can just help us beef up our Sunday morning usher team or kids ministry. Because some from the Sunday morning are gonna move to Sunday evening and we need to replace. So my prayer is, even if you don't go to the 4:15, but you say, hey, tell me more on the volunteer page. Tell me more about what it is to be an usher on rotation. Everything is on rotation, once a month, twice a month. So we're asking you to prayerfully jump in. And we need this. So you can turn this into the offering box. You can scan it, talk, think about it. pray before, but we are raising up teams to help us launch that service. If you have questions, you know we have an elder email you can just send to elder@VCFamily. Questions, concerns, suggestions, or at this time too, you have something you're like, I really wanted to offer this or want to contribute in this way. There's a wonderful way to get it started through the elder email. All right, does anybody have any questions? I'm joking. I'm not going to answer them right now. But we're excited. We're thankful. We've paid off the mortgage of this place, and so we get to turn the lights on one more time. So we're going to give it our best part. Hi, Kai Kong. I see. Thank you for your hand. I'll get to you after service. I was joking. I'm sorry. That was unfair. We want to get to Daniel chapter 11, but if you have a thought or question, I'll be available after. All right. Whew. Daniel chapter 11. If you're a guest with us today, you're coming in, you are dropping in. We've been studying the whole book of Daniel. And when we study a whole book, we go wherever the book goes. It's not just me picking and choosing. And today is a challenging chapter with a lot of information. And yet we are working our way through Daniel. So just a little context, we're in the fourth and final vision that Daniel receives from God. We started this last week in Daniel chapter 10, which was merely the introduction to what the angel, the content of the message, which we're going to get right into today. We're only going to get to the end of chapter 11, but the vision and the message continues into chapter 12, which will conclude next week. So we're just dropping in today. A little bit of review. If you've been with us throughout the whole study of the book of Daniel, there have been multiple dreams or visions given. Let's just review a couple of them. Remember in Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, was given a dream about this statue that had a head of gold, chest of silver, mid-range of bronze, and then legs of iron. And it's always a tough word for me to say. Legs of iron. And what we learned is that Babylon is that head of gold. But the vision said, but after you, Nebuchadnezzar, meaning Babylon's not gonna be on the scene forever. There's gonna be another kingdom and then another kingdom. So we know that from history that it was Babylon, then the Medes and the Persians were silver. Then it was followed by Greece, which took over. And we believe the legs represent Rome, and Rome was in charge when Christ was born. But a part of his vision also was that there was this giant rock that was cut out, not from human hands, but it hits this statue and obliterates it. But then the rock grows up. We see in verse 44 of Daniel 2, it grows up to fill the whole earth. And the translation, the interpretation is that the God of heaven will set up his own kingdom that will never be destroyed. It will crush all those kingdoms, bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. So this is also the overarching kind of theme of the book of Daniel, is that Babylons will come and go. Empires will rise and fall. Many of them will be evil towards God and God's people, but God has the final victory. That rock that's cut out, that is Christ himself. And the kingdom of Christ will put an end to all these evil earthly kingdoms, and it will never end. And so I want us to keep that in mind, because today when we study in Daniel chapter 11, it's not a brand new information. It's actually going to flesh out some of the visions we've already studied in Daniel. It's going to give some more detail to these future kingdoms. In Daniel chapter 8, our next slide, remember Daniel was given a vision of a ram. We know in that chapter that was declared to be Persia. But then after Persia, this goat comes, and that is Greece. And then from Greece, we know that leader was Alexander the Great, but then he dies at a young age, 4 horns. He gave his empire over, not to his sons, but to 4 of his generals took over. And out of one of those generals, Seleucus, is going to come eventually a very evil, nasty king who's gonna set his aggression upon God's people. This beastly, this super beast. We know him from history to be, next slide, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes. He gave himself that name. We've already studied this, but I want you to keep in mind, because today we're gonna hear more about Antiochus IV. He reigned over the northern kingdom of Syria from 175 BC to 164 BC, and he sought to eliminate every trace of Israel's faith, worship, and life. Keep Antiochus IV in mind because a lot of verses are going to be devoted to talk about him. So today's passage is back, it takes place in about like 536 BC, hundreds of years before this nasty ruler comes into play. But Daniel's given a glimpse into the future of God's people and some of the persecution and difficulty that's gonna come, but God is in control. God, in light of present circumstances, God is in control. Okay, what we're gonna read today is called predictive prophecy, meaning that God is going to unveil some very specific details about the future to Daniel back in like 536 BC. Joyce Baldwin, in her commentary on the book of Daniel, says we should all read chapter 11 with the Bible in one hand and a secular history book in the other. Because we live on this side of that prophecy, and as we look back to the history and the wars, you're gonna see how specific that this predictive prophecy has been fulfilled. And it's so precise, that's what leads many scholars to think that chapter 11 was not written by Daniel, because they said there's no way he could have known all those details about what would unfold in history. So that's why some believe that this chapter was written like in 160 BC or later, because after history, they can make it so precise. But my understanding is that, no, God knows the past, the present, and the future, and he can choose to reveal it. It's all been written in his book. And so I believe that Daniel did recount this vision, and yet God shows himself to be God because of how precise it goes. So reading that history book will help you see chapter 11. You read in history, many of the unnamed kings that we'll hear about in this prophecy, we can put names to based on what has happened in history. So let's pray and we'll get going. It's a lot. I hope you guys have coffee today. And if you're new with us, we're dropping in, but hopefully we'll walk away with a few things we can grab onto from chapter 11. Father, teach us from your word. We trust that you know the past, the present, the future. You have set limits upon even the most evil of kings and empires, and yet your people will go through deep, dark times and suffering. But God, in light of present circumstances, God, you are in control, and you will have ultimate victory. So may that bring peace and hope to us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Daniel chapter 11, verse 2 through 4. I'm gonna skip around a bit. We know that at this time, 536 BC, that Cyrus is king of Persia. He's in his third year of his reign. We learned that last week. Verse 2, the angel now speaks to Daniel. The angel says to Daniel, "Now then I tell you the truth. 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and then a 4th, who will be far richer than all the others. When he has gained power by his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece." History tells us that 4th king is a man named Xerxes, or you might know him as Ahasuerus from the book, King Ahasuerus of the book of Esther. He's written about there. Now, there are many other kings that come around him, but it's specifically focusing on him. We know from history that Xerxes invaded Greece, but he was defeated in 480 BC. We know that from history at the Battle of Salamis. And so right there at the end of verse 2, we're gonna go to verse 3, and he's gonna start talking about Greece. And so it's gonna skip over 200 years of Persian kings that are not named, but we're gonna move on to the next superpower that has influence or effect over God's people of Israel. Verse 3. So with my own words, after Persian rule and kings, then, verse 3, a mighty king will arise who will rule with great power and do as he pleases. Verse 4, after he has arisen, his empire will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 winds of heaven. It will not go to his descendants, nor will it have the power he exercised, because his empire will be uprooted and given to others. I've got to point you back to Daniel chapter 8 when we've already heard this about the king of Greece, whom we know to be, at this point, Alexander the Great, a huge, quick, conquering of land, but yet Alexander died at a young age. And his kingdom was not given to his sons, but was parceled out between 4 of his generals, right? 2 of those generals, one man was named Ptolemy, Ptolemy Soter. He becomes the king of the south, think Egypt. Another one of his generals eventually becomes, Seleucus I, becomes king of the north, think Syria. And now the next 5, from verse 5 to 20, we're gonna hear about just warring, battles going on between the north and the south, okay? Verse 5 through 20. The kings of the south, Egypt, and the kings of the north, Syria. But why is God in his prophecy to Daniel, why is he only focusing on the area of Syria and the area of Egypt down below? And so here we look at a map that helps us out. There are other things going on in history, but in biblical case, we're looking at God's people, and it's a theological view on what is happening according to God's plan. So you see the northern kingdom, the Seleucid Empire, right? Think Syria. They're gonna be, anytime we hear the king of the north, just kind of think of that section. When we hear the king of the south, think about Ptolemy or the Ptolemaic Empire, think Egypt. Now, what piece of land is right between those 2 empires? You see, Jerusalem, God's people, they're caught. And that's why the prophecy is gonna focus on them, because I think about 2 gorillas that are fighting, and you're caught in the middle, and you're gonna get trampled and beaten upon as they go back and forth. And eventually one of those kings is gonna turn his aggression towards Jerusalem and God's people. And so when we hear Israel is the sliver of land that's scrunched between these 2 opposing dynasties. And so here we go. If you get lost as I do, I've been reading through this 9, 10 times this week. I'm starting to get a little bit of a better handle. I get lost even now reading it. Anytime you get lost in these next 15 verses, just say this to yourself: kingdoms in conflict. The north against the south. You're gonna see that the south kind of dominates early, but later the north will dominate near the end of this passage. Also, one last thing, you're gonna read about the king of the north, and then you're gonna read about the king of the south. And my mind, maybe it's you too, as I was reading through this, I kept thinking that's the same dude through the whole passage. It's not. It'll refer to the king of the north, whoever was reigning at that time, but later it'll say the king of the north, and it means his successor. Like if I tell you about the president of the United States, he emancipated the slaves. And the president later of the United States, we sent an army to Iraq. And I use the president of the United States, but am I talking about the same dude? No, different presidents, but I'm just saying the president of the United States. So same thing here with the king of the south, king of the north. Just want you to know it refers to many different kings of the north and the south. Great. You're like, come on, Trav, let's just get to it. Verse 5, kingdoms in conflict. Verse 5, the king of the south, whom we know from history to be Ptolemy I. Ptolemy, he will become strong, but one of his commanders, whom we know to be Seleucus I, one of his commanders will become even stronger than he had and will rule his own kingdom with great power. Verse 6, after some years, they will become allies. The daughter of the king of the south will go to the king of the north to make an alliance. But she will not retain her power. We know her name from history, it's Berenice. Berenice married Antiochus II, the king of the north. We know that from history. But she will not retain her power, and he and his power will not last. In those days, she will be betrayed together with her royal escort and her father and the one who supported her. Problem was, when she got given to the king of the north, Antiochus II, he already had a wife. Laodice was her name, we find out. And she ends up poisoning Berenice and the king at the time. So this is all history that we get to unpack. Verse 7, one from her family line, Berenice's brother, Ptolemy III, will arise to take her place. He will attack the forces of the king of the north, and enter his fortress. He will fight against them and be victorious. Verse 8, he will also seize their gods, their metal images, their valuable articles of silver and gold, and carry them off to Egypt. For some years, he will leave the king of the north alone. Verse 9, then the king of the north, whom we know to be Seleucus II, will invade the realm of the king of the south, but will retreat to his own country. Verse 10, his sons will prepare for war and assemble a great army, which will sweep on like an irresistible flood and carry the battle as far as his fortress. Kingdoms in conflict. Verse 11, then the king of the south, we believe to be Ptolemy IV, will march out in a rage and fight against the king of the north, Antiochus III, whom we know, who will raise up a large army, but it will be defeated. We think that's the Battle of Raphia in 217 BC. Hundreds of years after Daniel's given this prophecy, we are seeing it fleshed out in history, in our history. Verse 12. When the army is carried off, the king of the south will be filled with pride, will slaughter many thousands, yet he will not remain triumphant. Verse 13, for the king of the north will muster another army larger than the first, and after several years, he will advance with a huge army fully equipped. So we're gonna start to see the reign of the northern kingdom. They're gonna start to reign. Verse 14, in those times, many will rise against the king of the south. Those who are violent among your own people will rebel in fulfillment of the vision, but without success. Verse 15, then the king of the north will come and build up siege ramps and will capture a fortified city. The forces of the south will be powerless to resist. Even their best troops will not have the strength to stand. Verse 16, the invader from the north, whom we know to be Antiochus III, the invader will do as he pleases. No one will be able to stand against him. He will establish himself in the beautiful land, that's referring to Israel, and will have power to destroy it. How you doing? Kingdoms in conflict. They're just warring back and forth. Verse 17. He, Antiochus III, king of the north, will determine to come with the might of his entire kingdom, will make an alliance with the king of the south. He will give him a daughter in marriage. We know her name to be Cleopatra, but not the Cleopatra about the movies that we watch, not that Cleopatra. His daughter in marriage in order to overthrow the kingdom, but his plans will not succeed or help him. Verse 18. Then he will turn his attention to the coastlands, will take many of them, but a commander will put an end to his insolence and will turn his insolence back on him. Verse 19, after this, he will turn back toward the fortress of his own country in the north, but will stumble and fall to be seen no more. Antiochus III, history tells us, dies in 187 BC. Verse 20. His successor, whom we know to be Seleucus IV, his successor will send out a tax collector to maintain the royal splendor, meaning give us some money so we can pay off Rome. In a few years, however, he, Seleucus IV, will be destroyed, yet not in anger or in battle. And what we know is that Seleucus IV sends a tax collector named Heliodorus to collect money to pay off Rome, but instead, Heliodorus poisons Seleucus IV. And that's in 175 BC. And so there's wars and wars. But now what happens in verse 21 gets us to 175 BC. And I've already shown you that's when Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, this evil super beast king that's already been talked about in the book, that's when he comes into power. And now we're going to zoom in. The next, like verse 21 through 35, is all about Antiochus, even though he only reigns for like 12 years. But because of the intensity and the persecution that Antiochus IV brings towards Israel, that's why we kind of slow down a little bit here. And so I'm going to jump around a little bit and get us to when Antiochus IV turns his aggression towards Israel. But let's start in verse 21. He, Seleucus IV, will be succeeded, by a contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. Antiochus IV was not a bloodline heir to the throne, but he captured the hearts of people to be their ruler. The next few verses talk about some of his feats and some of his battles, but I want us to jump down to verse 28. Still talking about Antiochus IV, that super beast, nasty horn of chapter 8. Verse 28, the king of the north, that's Antiochus IV, will return to his own country with great wealth, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant. That is talking about God's covenant with his people of Israel. He will take action against it and then return to his own country. Verse 29, at the appointed time, he will invade the south again, but this time the outcome will be different from what it was before. Verse 30, ships of the western coastlands will oppose him and he will lose heart. Look what happens next. Then he will turn back and he will vent his fury against the holy covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the holy covenant. And so for Daniel, looking ahead hundreds of years later, 350 some years later, this is going to be a horrific and terrible time for God's people. Antiochus IV will put thousands and thousands of Jews to death. He removes the temple sacrifice. He desecrates the temple. He kills anyone who has a copy of God's law or has their son circumcised. He's trying to eradicate anything about Jewish faith and life and practice. It is going to be a horrible time. Those of us on this side of history, when we look back, we know there are accounts written about Antiochus IV and the persecution he brings to God's people. Verse 31, it gets specific about his fury against Israel. His armed forces, verse 31, will rise up to desecrate the temple. He put an altar of Zeus in the holy temple in Jerusalem. He will abolish the daily sacrifice so that the practices of the temple will no longer continue. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. And we believe this to be in 167 BC that Antiochus IV had a pig, an unclean animal, sacrificed upon the burnt altar. And therefore, ruining and stopping the sacrifices unto God. The abomination that causes desolation. Verse 32. With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant, but the people who know their God will firmly resist him. Verse 33, those who are wise will instruct many, the God followers then. Though for a time, what will happen to them? They will fall by sword, they will be burned, captured, or plundered. This is the fate of the faithful unto God. Dale Ralph Davis says, in this reign of terror, it seemed like the only choice an Israelite had was to be a live pagan or a dead Israelite. They had to make a choice on whether to live or die, whether they would follow God's holy covenant. It's interesting to know that we see that God's people in verse 33, they do fall by the sword. They're burned, captured, plundered. But as we've been reading in Daniel, we've also seen God's rescue. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in chapter 3, thrown into the fiery furnace, and God rescues them. Daniel chapter 6, Daniel is thrown into the den of lions, and God shuts the mouths of the lions. Daniel is rescued. So we see rescue, but we also see that is not the norm. Sufferings and captivity will be that's what's going to be happening to the faithful followers of God, even to this day. That God at times rescues. And at times we see, even in Hebrews chapter 11, that God's faithful will be sawed in two. We know the affliction that comes upon those who continue to be faithful to God. Verse 34, when they fall, they will receive a little help, and many who are not sincere will join them. Verse 35, some of the wise will stumble so that they may be refined and purified and made spotless until the time of the end, for it will still come at the appointed time. This is, I believe, pointing towards the end of Antiochus and his evil reign in 164 BC. So there's hope in this last statement until the time of the end, for it will still come at the appointed time. There's a limit that has been imposed upon Antiochus IV and the destruction that he'll bring upon God's people. God has already appointed his end, And Antiochus can only operate within his appointed time. Why give Daniel the knowledge of these terrible events that are going to happen to his people? We studied this in chapter 8. To tell Daniel the truth for him and Israel and for God's people, there will be future darkness. But to be forewarned is to be forearmed. That as we see these things and wars coming and happening and people coming against God's truth, that we are not surprised. We can be saddened, but we are not shocked or surprised. Now, I want you to know what I'm breaking right here. We're getting into verse 36, and there's a big debate. I'm entering you into the big debate between verse 35 and what continues in verse 36. On the surface, it seems like verse 36 continues to talk about Antiochus IV. But there's a big problem with what comes next. The description we're about to read does not conform to what we know about the end of Antiochus IV's life. History does not confirm any of these things that is referring to Antiochus IV. But we talk about this king, this mysterious king. We believe, and I think it's widely understood, though this is up for good theological debate, that it's widely understood that in verse 36, that the prophecy looks ahead to the end of time, to another evil, mega-horned, beastly king that's going to be in the same kind of type or vein as Antiochus IV, what will be the ultimate, we've read about that ultimate super beast that eventually will face its end and judgment will come in and people will be resurrected from the dead either to judgment or to eternal life. That it appears that we're looking towards the end of time to a yet to be revealed future evil super beast that's going to rise up against God and his people. And so that means in Antiochus IV, yes, he's this evil, mega-horned super beast, but there's many of them, and other people wear that clothing all throughout history, that we see that others will arise, but ultimately there's a future, ultimate, larger version of Antiochus IV. I believe that's what we're going to learn about in these next 11 verses or 10 verses. So let me read verse 36. We've read about the time of the end, which may signal that Antiochus IV comes to his close. Verse 36. This king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. Verse 37. He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors. Remember, Antiochus IV brought in a statue of Zeus. He did have regard for his father's gods. But this king will have no regard for the gods of his ancestors or for the one desired by women, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. So apparently this evil future yet to be revealed super beast will deify himself. He will claim to be God himself. Verse 38. Instead of them, he will honor a god of fortresses. A God unknown to his ancestors, he will honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. One theologian believes that the God of fortresses means the God of war, that this evil king is going to worship. It's the personification of war, and he will regard no other God but war. Verse 39, he'll attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign god and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. He will make them rulers over many people and will distribute the land at a price. That does not match Antiochus IV. Let me conclude. Let me get us to verse 45. We're in verse 40. At the time of the end, the king of the south will engage him in battle, and the king of the north will storm out against him. So I don't think that's Antiochus IV. I think the king of the north and the king of the south will storm out against him with chariots and cavalry and a great fleet of ships. He will invade many countries and sweep through them like a flood. Verse 41. He will also invade the beautiful land, referring to Israel, God's people. Many countries will fall, but Edom, Moab, and the leaders of Ammon, those are usually the sworn kind of enemies of Israel, they will be delivered from his hand. Verse 42, he will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape. This is not Antiochus IV. Verse 43, he will gain control over the treasures of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt, with the Libyans and Cushites in submission, verse 44. But reports from the east and the north will alarm him, and he will set out in a great rage to destroy and annihilate many, verse 45. Notice how quickly he comes to his end. He will pitch his royal tents between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain. Yet he will come to his end, and no one will help him. Done. Seems a little anticlimactic. And just like that, the future evil king is dead, wiped off the stage of human history with very few words. Sometimes you can say a lot by saying very little. Dale Ralph Davis says this: it's like God is saying to Daniel, to his readers, to us, you must be prepared. In this world, you will face persecution. You will face tribulation, but don't think too much of the tribulator. For though he may be dreadfully terrifying, he will be easily disposed of. For Christ will simply blow him away. Remember, Daniel chapter 2, that rock. We know that the kingdoms will come and go. We're going to end here today. Let me close with a bit of reflection. Thank you. You guys have hung in there. I think you've hung in there. Maybe you've hung in there. I'm barely hanging in there. Kingdoms in conflict. Daniel's vision reveals the instability of earthly empires. The instability, and yet it also reveals the prevailing purpose of God. Earthly kingdoms will always be in conflict. There will be wars and rumors of wars. Jesus tells his disciples that in the New Testament. I like what Ian Duguid says. He says, the balance of power in earthly politics may shift, but never comes to permanent rest. And we see that in our day. But God's kingdom is stable, it is enduring, and God's purpose will prevail. And therefore, one of the major themes of Daniel, in spite of present difficulties, God is in control and will have ultimate victory. Will have final victory. In fact, God sets a limit to the evil kingdoms of this earth. You ever heard the term governor, but not referred to, politics, but like a car or something you're driving? An engine that has a governor on it. When I was at Cal State, I was driving for the mailroom, and I had this little mini truck. It was like a third of the size of a delivery truck. It was pretty awesome, and I had all the mail in there, and I would deliver it to the different departments at Cal State. But I remember whenever I was flooring, or getting more gas, whenever I'd hit 20 miles per hour, it wouldn't go over 20 miles per hour. Do you know why? Because they put a governor. We should do this with our kids' cars, right? I should do this with some of your cars. Or drive a car like I did, a Datsun 210, that can't even get too fast. It's its own governor. So it's a governor, and it limits. My Nissan Rogue that I drive, it's used, I got it. Apparently when it gets too hot, it has its own governor. I found this out as to why I can't go over 60 miles per hour on really hot days. It's a governor keeping me safe. Antiochus, the evil, horned super beast of chapter 8. Remember, his evil is rampaging against the people of God, and yet he can only function. God has set a governor, a limit upon the extent of his evil. For Antiochus IV has a set appointed time of his end. And we even learn about this super evil beast that will yet to be revealed. But God has declared his end already written in his book of truth. And though we will suffer, and evil kingdoms will reign, and God's people will be persecuted and put to death, yet we know that God has set an appointed time, and ultimately his kingdom will come and decimate all the earthly kingdoms, and his kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom. Which is why I want us to lift our eyes above our present conflict. For even Daniel to lift his eyes among the fear of what might be happening to God's people. To lift our eyes above our present suffering and our present afflictions, to find peace in God, to find hope in God, in his sovereign plan that he can even reveal to his chosen servants, because he knows it has been written in his book of truth. And in God's kindness, he has forewarned us to forearm us, to withstand this persecution, to withstand this temptation, to turn away from God's holy word and his holy covenant, that we would stand faithful to the end, that we would be a beacon of light in our various Babylons that we find ourselves in. For God has determined the time of the end. Let us rest in his sovereign plan and purpose. Let us rest in him. Father, this word is difficult. And yet, God, we see with a history book that, God, you revealed early the things that would happen. Your word is true. We can trust you, that you declared your ultimate victory, and we look to you. So give us peace and hope and give us strength to remain faithful to you in the midst of a culture that stands against you. Thank you for your word. Help us understand. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, my friends, I'm just gonna send you out with these words. We have people available to pray with you. Thank you for hanging in there. We're gonna conclude Daniel next week. This vision continues in chapter 12. Let me send you out with these words from Psalm 33. May the unfailing love of God rest upon you, even as you hope in him. God bless you. Come forward for prayer if you need prayer.